The conductor's watch stopped at 11:47. Not broken, not shattered. Just stopped. The second hand frozen mid-tick, as if time itself had decided it didn't want to remember what happened next. Somewhere out there, on a stretch of track that still exists today, a train carrying 43 passengers pulled away from a station platform on a cold November night and simply never arrived at the other end. No wreckage, no signal, no final radio call crackling through static. One moment it was a scheduled departure, logged in a dispatcher's book with a routine little check mark beside it. The next, it was a question that has never been fully answered, not by investigators, not by historians, not by anyone who has tried to trace where that train and everyone on it actually went. Picture this for a second. You're standing on a platform at night. The air smells like coal smoke and cold metal. A whistle cuts through the dark, sharp and lonely, the kind of sound that seems to travel further than it should. You climb aboard, find your seat, maybe nod to a stranger across the aisle, and you settle in for what should be an unremarkable ride. That's all this was supposed to be. Unremarkable. And that's exactly what makes it so unsettling. Because the ordinary things are the ones that stay with us the longest when they go wrong. If a story like this already sent a small chill down your spine, stick around, because what I'm about to walk you through gets stranger the deeper you go. And if you're the kind of person who likes uncovering the parts of history that don't make it into textbooks, go ahead and subscribe right now, because on Shadowlight Stories, this is exactly the kind of mystery we live for, and there is more waiting for you after this one. So let's set the scene properly. The year was deep in the era when railways were the arteries of entire countries, when a train wasn't just transportation, it was a promise. A promise that you would leave one place and arrive at another, safely, on schedule, like clockwork. Entire towns were built around that promise. Families waited on platforms with their hearts in their throats for loved ones returning from war, from work, from long journeys across unfamiliar land. So when a train departed and simply failed to reach its destination, it wasn't just a logistical problem. It was a wound in the fabric of something people trusted completely. The station records that night are almost painfully mundane. A departure time, a weather note, mild, clear skies, a passenger count, 43 souls, along with 2 crew members up front. Nothing about that log suggests anything unusual was coming. That's the part investigators would later find almost unbearable, because tragedy usually leaves a trace of warning somewhere, a delay, a mechanical complaint, a strange feeling someone mentioned to a friend. Here, there was nothing. Just an ordinary night that quietly swallowed a train whole. The track that train was supposed to follow ran through a long stretch of open countryside before curving toward a river crossing and then into the next town roughly 2 hours away. There were no tunnels along that route, no sharp mountain passes, no dangerous terrain that history books point to as an obvious hazard. This wasn't some treacherous mountain line prone to landslides. It was flat, familiar ground that thousands of trains had crossed safely for decades before and would continue crossing safely for decades after. And that's exactly why, when search parties went looking the next morning, what they found, or rather, what they didn't find, made absolutely no sense. There was no wreckage anywhere along the line. Not scattered metal, not broken rail, not so much as a scorch mark suggesting fire. The track itself was untouched, still perfectly aligned, still gleaming faintly under the morning frost as if nothing at all had passed over it the night before. Search teams walked the entire stretch, twice, checking every embankment, every ditch, every patch of woods close enough to the rails that debris could have scattered into it. Nothing. It was as though the train had simply lifted off the earth somewhere between one station and the next. Now here's where the story stops being just a strange accident and starts becoming something people still argue about generations later, because a train doesn't vanish quietly, steel doesn't just dissolve. 43 human beings don't disappear without a single piece of luggage, a single shoe, a single scrap of clothing turning up somewhere along miles of open track. Investigators combed nearby villages, interviewed farmers who lived along the line, spoke with signalmen who worked the stations before and after the vanishing point. Some of them reported hearing the train pass, right on schedule, the familiar rhythm of wheels on rail fading into the night exactly as it should have. Others, working stations only a short distance further down the same line, swore they never heard it arrive at all. Think about that contradiction for a moment, because it's the kind of detail that keeps this story alive. 2 groups of railway workers doing the same job, listening for the same sound, on the same night, gave completely different accounts. One side heard the train pass through as expected. The other heard nothing but silence where an arrival should have been. It's not that the story lacks witnesses, it's that the witnesses themselves seem to be describing 2 different nights entirely, layered on top of each other like a photograph exposed twice. This is the part of the story that separates it from a simple unsolved accident and turns it into something almost philosophical, because human beings are wired to need explanations. We don't do well with blank spaces. Give us a wreck, a fire, even a sabotage plot, and we can process it, grieve it, file it away as tragic but understandable. What we struggle with is absence itself, a thing that simply stops existing without telling us why, and maybe that's really what keeps stories like this alive for over a century. Not the fear of what happened to that train, but the fear of what it means that something so large, so solid, so full of living, breathing people, could simply cease to be part of the world with no explanation offered in return. Investigations continued for years. Officials interviewed dozens of witnesses, cross-checked shipment manifests, even considered the possibility of an elaborate insurance fraud involving a staged disappearance, though that theory collapsed almost immediately once someone pointed out the obvious. No one profits from vanishing 43 innocent travelers along with an entire locomotive. Whoever, or whatever was responsible for what happened that night wasn't chasing money. It was chasing something else entirely, something no official report has ever managed to name. Here's a detail that rarely makes it into the shorter retellings of this story, and it's the one that still gives researchers pause today. Roughly 6 months after the disappearance, a farmer working land close to the river crossing found a single train ticket half buried in soil near the tracks, still legible enough to read the printed departure time, 11:47. The exact same time frozen on that conductor's pocket watch, recovered separately, weeks earlier, near an entirely different point along the line, nearly 11 miles away. 2 objects, 2 locations, one impossible, identical moment stamped onto both of them, as though the entire train had somehow existed in more than one place during its final minute. Some historians dismiss this as coincidence, a simple case of standard scheduling appearing twice because, of course, that was the scheduled departure time to begin with. And maybe that's the rational answer. But rational answers have never been very good at making stories like this quiet down completely, have they? What strikes me most, honestly, isn't the mystery of where the train went. It's what this story reveals about us, the people still telling it, more than 100 years later. We don't return to stories like this because we expect a tidy solution to fall into our laps after all this time. We return because somewhere inside us, we recognize the fear underneath it. The fear of stepping onto something ordinary, something we trust completely, a routine, a relationship, a plan for the future, and having it disappear without warning, without closure, without ever telling us why. This isn't just a story about a train. It's a story about how fragile certainty really is, dressed up in steel and steam so we can look at it from a safe distance. If this is the kind of mystery that sticks with you long after the video ends, I want to hear from you. Do you think there's a rational explanation buried somewhere in old records we simply haven't found yet? Or do you believe some disappearances are meant to stay unexplained? Leave your theory in the comments, because some of the most convincing explanations I've ever come across for stories like this one came directly from people watching, not from official reports. And if this story kept you here until the very last word, consider sending it to someone who loves a good unsolved mystery, not just as a video to pass along, but as an invitation to sit with the same unanswered question that has kept this story alive for generations. Somewhere, on a stretch of track that still carries trains today, 1147 still arrives, right on schedule, every single night. Nobody has ever explained why some nights it still feels like something is missing.